I appreciated the opportunity to struggle and have a challenge. You listen to the great stories of our grandparents that have gone through wars, and obviously this is nothing on that. But I really feel like you learn your lessons as a person, as a workplace culture, as a community culture, having gone through struggle together. Easy street, everyone becomes lazy.
Today on Dirty Linen, we are heading to Albury-Wodonga, the New South Wales Victorian border, which Premier Daniel Andrews and New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian have just announced will be opened on November 23. That is so exciting. It's felt so weird as a Victorian, well, as a Melburnian, first of all, to not be able to go beyond 5K at the moment, not beyond 25K. And even after that is loosened, my leash will still not let me get over the New South Wales border. But I'm excited to think that that is going to change. To talk about this and other matters, we are checking in with Jacob Wolki. Jacob owns Cycle Station, which is a bike store and also a cafe, but he does so much more as well. He's a farmer, he's opening a butcher. And Jake, I'm just so excited to have you on the show. Thanks for coming along to have a chat.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dani. Always ready to talk.
Yeah, good. Well, that's what we love on this podcast. It's all about the chat. So let's start with the reopening of the border. Tell me what it's been like to have that border closed and how you're feeling about it reopening.
Look, it's been such a long journey over the last few months that we've settled into so many different stages of new normal. So, going right back to the start when we didn't even know if we were going to be allowed to stay open, and thankfully we were. Like, we're very grateful that we were allowed to trade, albeit in a limited capacity, takeaway only, obviously no dine-in, and everything was heavily restricted, but just so thankful that we're able to keep going in some capacity. To think about all the different versions of bubble extensions and lockdowns and rules, and then the two different borders, having Albury-Wodonga having different sets of rules, to all the way to there's finally like a finish point, like a goalpost in sight. I'm just glad I'm not going to have to trawling the internet trying to catch up with the latest guidelines and best practice. I'm sick of trying to figure out how to be compliant.
It's such a good point that you raise. I mean, the rules are one thing, but finding out the rules and working out how to apply them, and I guess also reading into the rules, like, well, what do they mean by this? What do they want us to do here? I mean, I think you sort of realize over and over again that our society obviously is not set up for a pandemic and the restrictions that go with it, but it is exhausting to just keep dealing with all the different things we've needed to deal with, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most taxing things for me through the whole process has been trying to, keep my workforce informed, and staff coming to work. Maybe ScoMo or Dan Andrews has a comment on the 6 p.m. news, and we're all turning up to work the next day, or I'm getting messages on Facebook from my staff that night going, well, what are we doing? What's the rules? And I'm thinking, well, you just watched the same press release I did. Like, there's this perception from, just to society, I guess, whether it be customers or staff, that business owners have some sort of direct line to the government where we get all this crystal clear information. But all of our info has come from second party news sources. Nothing. All the information that was actually released on government websites was generally notoriously late, extremely vague, and hard to find. And when we did actually have some clarification on things like the border crossing in Albury-Wodonga, obviously we're twin cities either side of the Murray River, and I had a lot of staff on each side of the border. And when they actually did release a clear way to get your border permit to cross to come to work, the website kept crashing for 2 or 3 days. So when the government actually does come up with the info, it just doesn't work anyway.
That is, yeah, so strange. I mean, even to see photos images of the signage, no entry to New South Wales, big fines. Like, it just doesn't feel like our Australia, does it?
No, it's very bizarre. And having staff that want to come to work and cannot come to work, like, that has to be one of the most, I guess, like, demoralizing situations for people. I had staff that took themselves, they basically resigned because they couldn't get to work. They were stuck over in the wrong postcode in Victoria, and we're on the Albury side, New South Wales side. They couldn't get to work. There was no light at the end of the tunnel. There was no communication as to when they will be able to get to work. So they resigned and hopped onto JobSeeker and started looking for a job on that side of the border.
Oh, that's
And
terrible.
like it's a really tough thing for people to do, but just quietly we've hired them all back now, so we're ready to go.
Shouldn't keep that one quiet. Should be shouting that from the rooftops. That's awesome. That's
Well,
really good.
I don't know. Are we allowed to give people separation certificates to put them on job seeker and then rehire them later? I don't know. You just got to play by the government's rules, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know about that one specifically, but it doesn't sound, I mean, they resigned for a reasonable reason and then they're the people that you want back. So it sounds like it should be fine. It sounds like a good news story to me.
Yeah, it's what we're forced to do. So, just happy to have the team back on board.
Yeah, incredible. Well, Jake, tell us, like, set the scene for us, like, explain your various businesses and the things that you do.
Absolutely, we've got a fair bit going on under the banner, and every time I riff through it and let like when I meet people, new friends and stuff, and I tell them what we do, I listen to myself and I feel like I'm lying. It's just such a weird, such a weird setup. I'm like, geez, you talk rubbish, but this is my life. Okay, so almost 10 years ago, I purchased a bicycle shop with my parents. 5 years into that, the bicycle shop had grown heaps, just through bit of good fortune and a lot of hard work. And we purchased a lawn bowling club in town that was derelict and state owned. So we purchased that, we demolished it, and we built a custom, purpose built bicycle store. And we decided to put a cafe in it. And we've actually been in hospitality. It's what actually brought us to the region as a family 40, 50 years ago. And my family said never again, too much cleaning, too many early mornings, too many late nights, not interested. And we decided we wanted a cafe in there, the latte culture going together with the bike culture. And we approached two real estate agents that were customers in the bike store to represent the store and to find us a tenant being a cafe to go in there. And both real estate agents laughed at us and said, it's a horrible location. Don't even bother. Just sell bikes. Stick to what you know. And we, didn't like that response. And we thought, you know what, we're just going to have to do it ourselves. And, the irony is both of those real estate agents are in multiple times a week having meetings with customers, which I just think is hysterical. And we've got such a beautiful little spot there. We've created like an outdoor courtyard. We're right next door to the local heritage listed railway station. So the cafe's been going about 5 years. We also have a 45-hectare farm about 15 minutes out of town where we regeneratively farm beef, pork, chicken, eggs, honey, vegetables, fruit. We do the whole gamut and direct sales as well as supplying the farm. So we've got the paddock to plate story. And then during the start of COVID, when the Vic government limited the staffing of the abattoirs, we really hemorrhaged in our cash flow at the farm because we couldn't get any of our beef off to our customers. And was trying to figure out a way around that and had a few other little things that my processor, being my butcher, and I just weren't. It wasn't a really easy relationship. Like we really respect each other, and the butcher that was looking after me, he's a really good dude, but he had his business to run, and I might have wanted my beef hung longer to age longer. I might have wanted something smoked or cured without preservatives and without nitrites or something, and it just wasn't what he was into. And I thought this is too hard. We're all about the path of least resistance as a company, so we just bought a butchery, and we've had a few days operating, but we're ready to go 12th of this month. So in about 10 days, we are full steam ahead, and we're focusing on cutting and packaging uh, beasts for farmers and then facilitating them selling that direct to their customer. So we don't really have our headlights set on an open door butchery where you can walk in and buy your snags and your cuts for dinner. We're all about having a processing center to, strengthen the local food system and really help farmers build that direct connection with their customers and that resilience into their businesses.
Incredible. So I guess the link in the chain that I'm not quite clear on is the abattoirs, and that's sort of where this problem started for you. So what about that part of it?
The thing that happened with the abattoirs was when they limited their staffing to two-thirds because of transmission risks, which abattoirs are one of the biggest transmitters globally. So that's why they've cut the rostering down. The rule was they weren't accepting any livestock off small producers, but account holders could keep getting processed. Now, they won't give accounts to farmers. The accounts go to the butchers. So now that we've got an account with the abattoir being a butchery, we can send off our beasts and beasts of our customers under our account. We're no longer a small producer or an account holder.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So
So,
we've built a bit of security into the system.
okay. And how far away is the abattoir from you in Albury or where the farm is?
Wangaratta, so it's less than an hour's drive from Albury.
All right. Yeah, that's pretty close. Because we had recently on the podcast Jane Newgreen, who's set up Provenir, which is a on-farm butchery, which is so incredible. And as
Yes.
you may well know, she's also working with regenerative farmers and grass-fed beef. Is that do you? I mean, what do you think of that? Like, talk a bit. Like, I guess, yeah. Tell us about the abattoir system and what you think about it.
Well, look, I absolutely love what Provenier's done, and more of it needs to happen. And those guys are absolute. Sat in a few of their presentations over the last sort of year or so, and I absolutely love it. And there needs to be more of it. And those guys are such crackers that they're just going to get more and more on the ground. Like they're real doers, and it's just awesome. But the problem for me is when they turn up on the farm and process, the meat becomes theirs. I can no longer take it to sell to my customers. So they turn up on site, get the permissions, and they buy the animal, process it on site, and sell it through their channels. So it's a step better than turning up at the sow yards and auctioning off, and basically gambling away your last 12 months of hard work as a primary producer. When you go to the sales yards to sell your steers you bred for the season, you're really gambling because it goes to auction. You don't know if you're going to make a return or not till it sells. At least if you're selling through an avenue like Provenir, you've got a relationship with your customer, and there's negotiations and security into that system. But I want to take the system a little bit further and put the farmers in contact and in control with their own customers, and just make the processing part of that really easy. So the abattoir that we use, Gather Coles and Wang, I've got nothing bad to say about them. They're good people, but I would love to be in charge of that process myself. And we've got a little goal off in the distance of building our own micro abattoir. There's a few farms around the area that are in a very sort of rural ag zone that we're looking at purchasing, so that we need something in a specific zoning where we would be able to get the permissions to build a small abattoir. So that is something that we'd like to extend our process through before, because I think abattoirs can be done better. There can be more transparency. I was reading the other day about I think it's somewhere in America, and one of their street-facing walls is entirely glass. So people can see what happens inside, and that's the sort of stuff I like. Run your business in a way that there's nothing to hide. I love that. So that's sort of, that's off. We're not big planners. We sort of just do things as they happen. Take advantage of opportunities, but that is a little goal off in the distance that I'd love to be able to do, because we don't have many options as producers in the area. We've got the Wang Abattoir, and apart from that, you have to go basically all the way to Melbourne or all the way to Sydney to get your beef done. And the food case has become completely unrealistic.
Yeah, and Provenir only deals with cattle, and you've mentioned all the other animals that you've got on the farm. I mean, what have you got different plans for the other livestock?
Well, we like as a farm, we sell them direct to consumers as well, and the abattoir that we currently have an account with accept lamb, pork, and beef. They accept them all through their gates. So I think the Provenir, I think the reason they just accept beef is probably a little bit of marketing thing, because they're going for the beef market, and because they're such a small mobile abattoir, it's in a trailer. It probably really needs to be purpose built to handle the one sort of livestock. It just makes a lot of sense that they just really focus on that niche at where they are. But I can definitely see those guys having trucks for pigs in the future and that sort of thing. Why not?
Mm. I mean, I guess what you've sort of pointed to is with the abattoirs and the fact that then small farmers couldn't get their meat to market. We really did see the fragility of our supply chains highlighted during COVID. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We watched it crash in real time, and I reckon half the society out there's forgotten already. We basically learnt the hard way that supermarkets carry 3 days worth of stock on the shelves, and that's not a sort of a made up weird statistic. Like you can Google this and find this, and people have been talking about it for decades. As a business owner, I'd love to have that sort of stock turn. Wouldn't you love to turn your inventory over 100 times a year plus? That'd absolutely tickle me fancy. But it's a fragile system, and when people go in and they buy 2, 3, 5 times the amount they normally would, it just crashes really quick. And that's why, as a direct sales unit, what we try to talk to our customers about doing is buying a half a pig or a quarter of a cow or a whole lamb, and letting us break it down and package it in a way that they can deep freeze it and have a year's worth of meat in their freezer. From the start of the pandemic, basically all the way to now. I've been in the supermarket twice personally, and that was just to get nappies. I got a 3-year-old son, and my wife's due in about 3 weeks. It's just to get nappies because we have a larder at home. You know, we have a pantry with bulk rice and bulk wheat, and we're not preppers. We just hate going to supermarkets, and we love cooking. We cook a lot. We cook a lot of things from scratch, and you just need to have that stuff at home. You know, we've got freezers full of cubed up bone broth and all sorts of good stuff to get through. We were ready for a pandemic in that sense. I was trying to educate the customers. You know, you can't rely on Safeway if something like this happens. All the Scotch fillet's going to be sold out in 4 hours flat, and you know, what are you going to do then? Whereas the alternative is you could support your neighbour. You know, everyone, especially in towns like Albury-Wodonga, everybody knows a farmer. Everyone grew up with a farmer. Why not let them get the full retail dollar for all their work? You've got a guaranteed transparent farm because you know them about the produce that you're getting. You're supporting local business. You're supporting higher animal welfare because you can look the farmer in the eye. You can visit the farm. And then you've got food security at home. You've got a year's worth of produce in your house. It teaches you to cook in a way that honors the animal more. So people that are becoming a little bit, you know, vegetarian sensitive or vegan sensitive, I completely, I get all the sympathies. Like I hate the way a lot of the food system and the confined feeding operations treat animals. So this is a real way to sort of put your money where your mouth is and support locals that look after animals, right? And learn how to cook the whole animal and not just be a person that just eats prime cuts or just uses bits and pieces. I just think that there's so much goodness. And the reality is if you buy a quarter of a beef off a farmer, maybe 50 kilos of beef that'll last your family a year, it's probably cheaper than buying your beef cut by cut all year long as well. Like it might be $1,000 up front, but over the course of the year, I'm pretty convinced, especially if you're buying half decent quality meat from a butcher or something, it'll be cheaper as well. So it just ticks all the boxes across the whole board. And I love it when somebody sends me an email or gives me a phone call. I'm thinking of buying beef. I say to them, "You're sitting down. Let's go for a journey." I can't wait to, you know, just tell you all the pros and cons. It's just such a great system to be a part of.
Yeah, that's so lovely. I mean, I guess the stories you're telling, they do relate so much to community and to country communities. Can you talk about how community has played out in Albury-Wodonga with all the various things that you've been through? What have you noticed is really strong, and what's a little bit in trouble?
Well, if we think pre-COVID, you know, start of 2020, we had the bushfires and they were very close to us, January, February, and that hit our businesses a lot harder than COVID did in the beginning, or at all. To be like, we had 2 months of trade where our revenue across the board was 80% down. And, you know, when you're in hospitality, if you're trying to keep your staff on the books and your revenue's 80% down, you know, you're in trouble. You're hemorrhaging. And same in the bike shop. Like our wages in retail in the bike shop are 20% of our revenue. So there was no money left for anything. And that was 2 months of no support from the government. Like there was no stimulus and all these things. And not that I want those things, but it's just painting a picture as to how that, for communities that were regional and affected by bushfires, you'll actually find a lot of people found that a lot harder than the subsequent COVID challenges when all of a sudden, because it's maybe national and it's a bit political, they're shelling out money and giving everybody JobKeeper and telling banks to put the loans on hold and all this sort of stuff. So when they actually came through, we didn't qualify for any JobKeeper, but we got some pay-as-you-go help, and we got to negotiate our bank loans a little bit. And that gave us a lot of reprieve from the bushfires. We were finally able to take a breath from that. And, you know, not only was it oppressive, the smoke in town and the animals on the farm were really struggling, but it was hard on the businesses. And then COVID came, and I sat all the staff down right at the start, and we went through all their personal finances because we thought we were going to be shut down. And I said, look, I've got about 50 staff across my businesses. About 20 of them are salary earners. And I said to everybody, if we get shut down and we can't trade and you're all cashing in all your sick leave and all your annual leave, I'm 3 or 4 weeks and I'm done. I can't keep going. So we sat down and we budgeted with all the staff how much they'd need to get by, banking on, we didn't know if there was any government assistance or even if we were going to get shut down. And having that real time in the trenches with my people was tough, but it was really beautiful. You know, you're talking about community aspect, like to actually sit down with your staff and be really transparent about your business and say, I don't have any idea, but I want to help you. And if you can survive on 2 days pay and you can survive on 3, with all of our different circumstances, we'll pull through it together. And thankfully, we didn't need to do that because we didn't get shut down as hard as, you know, you guys did in Melbourne. But that was a beautiful, you know, community aspect. And the other thing I said to all my staff is we will not be closing voluntarily under any circumstances. Like if it's mandated, you do what you have to do. But voluntarily shutting is 100% not what we'll be doing, because there's too much online. There's too many livelihoods. We're paying too many mortgages. We're putting too many kids through school as a business. And and I said all the stuff, you don't have to come to work, but myself and my family, we're going to keep mowing, keep moving along to make sure everything's happening as best as we can. And to have I was very transparent about all this stuff on social media as well. I did daily lives for almost 6 weeks, talking to our customers about how we were counteracting things, and it was just amazing. Danny, the amount of people we changed our menu overnight from dine in to takeaway, and we added deliveries, and the amount of people that were buying stuff just for the sake of it, just to help us get along, was just it was the most beautiful thing. And I actually sit at the back of my house now, and I've got a little bit of a view of the estate that I'm in. And I look out there now, and I know about 20 of those houses that I didn't know before COVID, because I did deliveries of our meals to those houses during the early days of COVID shutdown. So I look out over this view, which just used to be rooftops. And now I look out there and I see a village and I see a community. So I've become really passionate about when you need to buy something, it shouldn't be what's the shiniest color that I like the most, or what's the best price. It should be who is in my street that I can support. And if there's no one in my street, what about my town? And if there's no one in my town, what about my state? And really working from the inside out, because when freight lines get shut off and supply chains fall apart, the door you're going to knock on when you need some eggs is your neighbor. So if your neighbour could have sold you a car because they have a car dealership, why are you driving 400 k's to shop them for $2,000? Support your neighbour, because one day you're going to need to knock on their doors to buy some eggs, and to borrow some eggs, and that's happened. And everybody's lived through that the last 6 months. So the community thing's there, but I think as business people, we have a role now to respectfully and tactfully stick to our guns about why, as a local business, we are worth more. And we need to do it in a way that's the way to do it respectfully and honestly is by being transparent with our customers. And you have to actually be a good local business. You can't just be a local business that sells stuff and then lines your pockets and goes and blows all your money overseas and imports all your own infrastructure from China and everything. You've got to walk the walk and talk the talk. So be a good local business, and then when people want to shop you or go overseas and buy their products or whatever it might be, or a big one in our region is go down to Melbourne and buy your pushy, or go down to Melbourne and buy your car. It's time for local businesses to prove why they're worth keeping the dollar local. And what better time than now to do that? Like, COVID has given us a yellow brick road opportunity to have that conversation with our customers, which is sorely needed, I think.
It's so interesting. I mean, that transparency, it sounds like just, to start the pandemic by doing these lives, it sounds like that didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, is this being so open about things and being so communicative? Is that something that you just turned on, or is that a thread through all these various businesses?
Oh, we've been very active on social media, and I love getting on live and waffling about things and talking rubbish to all my customers. They get on, we have a laugh together. I've been sort of operating like that for years, but I like I like listening to my base and either doing what they tell you they want. It always baffles me that these big stores like Myer or whatever might hire secret Santas to go in and shop, their secret shoppers to go in and have an experience and then fill out a form and tell them what their experience was. I've got friends that do this and they get paid good money to do it. When if they just went on Google and read the reviews about their business, they'd find out everything wrong pretty quick. That sort of thing. Just listen to your customers, listen to them. And if the customers have it wrong, tell them. Like I get negative reviews on my businesses from time to time on Facebook or Google or TripAdvisor, and I'm known around the area, around the traps, for writing essays back. And you can just Google any of our businesses and go sort by lowest and look at all the 1-star reviews and read my essays replying to them. And I'm not trying to feed it to them. I'm not arguing. I'm just painting a picture. Like, I'm a person. My business is full of people. We're genuinely doing the best we can, and maybe what you're expecting of us in this particular circumstance is not realistic, and here's why. And just trying to actually have a dialogue, like not trying to fight or say we're perfect, because sometimes I'll concede. I'm like, you know what? We should have done better. We really screwed up, and I'm really sorry you had that experience. Let's talk about it. How can I fix it for you? But I've always been really open into being open with my customers and having that dialogue with them, especially the negative ones, more than anything. You can't just reply to everybody that thinks you're great and ignore the people that, think you might need to be taken down a peg. So big about having a community and actually having a base around your business. And that's a two-way street, isn't it? Like you can't just go support us, we're local, and then log off at 5 o'clock and not want to engage with anybody that think you might be able to do better in certain ways, or they might just genuinely have a question about why you do things. You can't take it to heart. You got to have that conversation with them.
So, in the context of this, rich web of community connection that you established and fostered during the lockdowns, how did this closed border play into that? How did you negotiate the fact that you couldn't be with a whole bunch of people that probably wanted to get to you, and perhaps that you wanted to get to as well?
But the closed border thing happened in a few different stages. So right at the start, when they shut it down, they introduced a border bubble, which was just basically a few postcodes really close to themselves, and if you had a certain job, and you could fill out a pass and you could get across back and forward. So I think in that first shutdown of the border, I had maybe 7 staff that couldn't get to work because they were outside of the bubble and didn't have the right permissions, even if they were inside, because hospitality and retail don't rank high on the essential workers when you start talking about health workers and the stuff. So that was tough, but that was only a few days. It was only 3 or 4 days, and they started actively working to add suburbs or add postcodes and add tasks. So pretty quickly, after a few days of the first shutdown, I had a couple staff in Wodonga, right in central Wodonga, that could come to work. So what we would do, so they had the appropriate paperwork, and a lot of our customers didn't. They couldn't bring a bike over to get serviced, or they couldn't pick up meals. So what we were doing was getting our staff that were coming to work to do deliveries on either end of their shift. So on the way to work in the morning, before they came across, they'd pick up all the bikes that needed to be serviced that were booked in, and on the way home they'd deliver them all, and they'd deliver all the meals that they could. And then as the restrictions got bigger and bigger, we're problem solvers as business owners, aren't we? Like, people ask me I'm not on the roster on any of my businesses. They go, "What's your role?" I'm like, "I'm the firefighter. I'm just here to problem solve, and get creative and find ways that, should I really be doing that? I don't know. No one's going to say no, so I'll just get into it." So that was the way. So as it got restricted, more less restricted, and the suburbs opened up, we just did more and more of that, sending staff over, doing deliveries. I was doing a heap of them myself, since I don't really have a roster per se. I was one of the more flexible ones to be able to deliver all the home cooked frozen meals we were doing, and do bikes and deliver beef and all sorts of crazy stuff, which was fun. It was actually fun being able to do a live and say we got these new meals, and then orders come in, and then 4 or 5 hours later I'm delivering them, and they're like, "Oh, I've appreciated your video." And when people say stuff to me like that, I look at them, and first thing that comes to my head is, what video? It takes me a second to sort of cotton on what they're talking about. I'm like, "What are you talking? Oh, that video, thanks. Yeah, appreciate you watching." People actually watch those. What are you talking about?
I love it. Were you scared at any time about the virus escaping from Melbourne and hitting you in Albury-Wodonga?
No, not really, because I knew, the if we would have qualified for JobKeeper and all of a sudden got all these sort of unspoken concessions, like all of it, if you shut down, and I'm really not trying to make light of people that have shut down, because I would much have preferred to have stayed open like we've had, but if that would have happened, especially on the back of the fire, like, it would have almost been nice to have taken a breath. And we've got so many different things. Like, we hang our hats in so many different industries that we would have made do. We're fighters. We would have got in there and made do. But I really am glad that we were able to keep trading, because it was obviously the easier path for us. But I was pretty confident that we were going to stay open the whole time. And it sounds a little bit um, perverted almost, but I almost, I appreciated the opportunity to struggle and have a challenge. You listen to the great stories of our grandparents that have gone through wars, and obviously this is nothing on that. But I really feel like you learn your lessons as a person, as a workplace culture, as a community culture, having gone through struggle together. Easy street, everyone becomes lazy. So when it first happened, that's when I was sitting down with the staff, who were balancing the books and organising everybody. I was sort of dressing it up as, "Guys, this is a real opportunity for us to show each other what we're made of." And I had a few staff flake. I had a few quit early on. They just had nervous breakdowns and went home and, couldn't handle it. which is fine. That's you do you and we'll do us. But I was sort of a little bit, the appetite was excited about really being able to prove our worth. We have competitors in town, and one of the things that I think cuts us above the competitors is we'll work. We will outdo it. We had a bike shop close years ago in town, and as soon as they announced they were closing, I went and I hired all their staff. And I remember sitting down with one of them at dinner maybe a year later, and there was a new store opening in town again. And he goes, "Are you worried about them?" I said, "No." And he goes, "Why not?" I said, "I'll outwork them." And I just remember he looked me in the eye, and he just held my gaze for about 4 or 5 seconds, and he goes, "I know, I believe you. We're doing it together. I'm just, there's 24 hours in a day.
Yeah.
Pick one. You can always get stuff done, and there's no job too little or no task too big. You just need to get after it." So it's something else that makes me think about, riffing off what our grandparents went through. I recently read a book by an author, James Rebanks. I hope I said his name right. And it's The Good Life as a Shepherd or something. I butchered the title. But the Shepherd's Life or something.
Yes.
And he's a beautiful author, and I really enjoy reading his books. I've just actually bought his latest one. And he mentioned there's a passage in that where he talks about talking to the old farmers he's maybe in his 40s now. And when he was a young man working on the farm, he's talking to the grandfather generation, and these were guys that were around during the First World War, and they were reminiscing about the price of their meat during the First World War, because it meant that the English citizens could no longer buy the Spanish and French and Italian produce, and made them buy local. So they had a good trade in their farms. And I thought, how sad is that? We learned that lesson in World War One. That when a war happens, you no longer can you go and have all these exotic, frivolous things. Isn't it funny that things are always exotic when they're from further away, but the things next door are never exotic? That does my head in. But people want to support France or whatever. But then the World War One happens. So all of a sudden they learn to value their neighbour, and then it probably happens again in World War Two, and who knows how many times since. So I'm on a bit of a personal mission to read about those situations and those anecdotes and those happenings in history, and wrap them up in a tight little package and now that's happened to us in COVID, and it's probably going to happen again in 5 years. So instead of running away and spending your money on stupid stuff, let's all keep it local. So next time, we're a little bit stronger for it. We're a little bit more better for it. And when you do need the butcher, like the butchers in town, we're staying open till midnight to prep meat so their customers had meat for the next day, whereas Safeway and Australia Post and all these big businesses were refusing to pay overtime, so everybody just went without. So who's more valuable in that situation? So we need to think about these situations where local community and local business and local people really proved their worth, and remember them, and we need to articulate them when we're talking to our customers, and sort of wrap them up in this community package. And this is why we're all better together, guys, and let's go on. And then you actually, I just think there's something beautiful about knowing the person you buy stuff off to. So I'm back to supporting local, but I'm just so passionate about it. There's just so many. I just think there's pros, there's pros, there's pros. I just can't find any cons from it.
Well, it makes sense that, we sort of started where we began, because that's that beautiful loop, isn't it, of buying local, supporting local, living, knowing the people that you're buying things from. You definitely, walking the talk, Jacob, and it's absolutely inspiring to hear you speak about it. I would recommend to everybody that the book that you mentioned. It's James Rebanks, The Shepherd's Life. It's just absolutely beautiful. We'll put it in the show notes. Jacob, thank you so much for coming on and having a chat. I wish you open borders. Happy customers, and if they're not happy, then I trust that you'll be able to explain the situation and talk them around. But thanks so much for coming and having a chat today.
Yeah, really appreciate you having me. Thanks for your time.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about. We spend a week thrashing around each issue, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.